Hello there. I've been given a task to make a verbal assignment about the Veldt, which is a novel by Ray Bradbury. First, I will summarize the story. After that, I will characterize the role of technology and how it influences the family. Then I will comment on the ending of the story, and I will comment on the message of the story too. And last but not the least, I will relate it to other texts or issues we have discussed in class. I will start reading up my summarize of the story. The short story, The Veldt, written by Ray Bradbury in 1950, focus on the themes of danger that technology has and how to grow up your children. The main protagonist is Lydia and George, who is the parents to Peter and Wendy, who they live in a happy life home where the house does pretty much everything from bathing the kids to tie their shoes. Then they have bought a room in the house called the nursery, where you can go in and you can imagine, for example, the Veldt in this situation in Africa. Their children, Peter and Wendy, loves the nursery so much they got pretty much addicted to it. George and Lydia then tries to shut down the nursery because they do not feel it's safe for the growing up by the children, because they change behavior, which I also will talk about later. They are concerned. Yeah, it's because they're concerned for the children being more violent with their thoughts. And in the end of the story, the protagonist runs to the nursery because they can hear some screams coming from the room, which sounds very familiar, but there was nobody in the room, and then the door slammed behind them. Now I will talk about the role of technology and how it influences the family. The technology in the story pretty much affects their Peter and Wendy's behavior in the story. Peter and Wendy starts to get more violent towards the parents when they talk about shutting down the Veldt. The nursery room. And I have a quote on page 67, line 18, where Peter asks his father, "Will you shut off the house sometime soon? We are considering." "I don't think you better consider it anymore, father. I won't have any threats from my son." "Very well," and Peter strolled off to the nursery. This again shows that the technology it's becoming more vital for Peter to get into the nursery room, and then he starts to threat his father. And of course, because of the nursery, Peter do not look like himself anymore. I have another quote on page 66, line 31, where Peter says, "Father," said Peter. Yes, Peter looked at his shoes. He never looked at his father anymore, nor at his mother. "You aren't going to lock up the nursery for good, are you?" "That all depends." "On what?" snapped Peter. On you and your sister. If you intersperse this Africa with a little variety, Sweden perhaps, or Denmark or China. I thought we were free to play as we wished. You are with responsible bounds. This also shows that Peter is getting he snaps at his father, and he is again a bit more aggressive in his behavior towards his parents, because he's no longer able to, or his father and mother is talking about shutting down the house for some time because they are being concerned about their children. And another quote I have is on page 62 about the parents not feeling like they are their parents anymore. Page 62, line 3. That's just it. I feel like I don't belong here. The house is wife and mother, now an Engelsk maid. Can I compete with an African Veldt? Can I give a bath and scrub the children as efficiently or quickly as the automatic scrub bath can? I cannot. And it isn't just me. It's you. You have been awful nervous lately. I suppose I've been smoking too much, says George. George and Lydia have this conversation about them feeling like they are being subbed off for the good of the house. So the house is taking over the parent role, which also affects the children. The technology in the story also makes Peter and Wendy not want to grow up and being adults because they have no responsibility to anyone right now, and that we also see this in Peter Pan. So the names are basically from Peter Pan, where they are flying away to an island where there are no adults and parents, so they can do what they want, and they also don't want to be parents, adults, I mean. Now I'm going on to comment on the ending of the story. As I said before in the summary, George and Lydia heard some screams from the nursery room, which sounded very familiar, so they rushed down to check if it was Peter and Wendy. But when they arrived, there was no Peter and Wendy inside the nursery room, and then suddenly the door behind them closed, and they can't open it from inside. So Peter and Wendy have trapped their parents inside the nursery room with some hungry lions. So in the ending, the children, Peter and Wendy, kind of takes over the house, and by luring their parents into the nursery room where there are some hungry lions, and both George and Lydia thinks the creatures seems very alive or real. So they end up eating both George and Lydia. This also shows us that too much technology can damage the upbringing of a child. They're like sort of possessed in this novel with the nursery room. Then I will comment on the message of the story. It's also it could be dangerous to children to rely too much on technology and the consequences it have to the children. In this case, for example, the nursery room or their house is pretty much bathing the kids and scrubbing the kids and tying their shoes. They don't have to do normal. They don't have this sense of being self-reliance, and this also shows that too much of the technology can really make the children stupid in some way, to not care about themselves and rely on themselves. They always rely on the technology and thinks it can do anything for them, basically. Another message of the story could be bad parenting in terms of they think too much of the behavior Peter and Wendy have when they shutting down the house. Instead of they just shutting the house down, they pretty much just let it goes on, and it has some consequences in the end towards the parents. They got eaten by lions. Now relate to other texts and issues discussed in class. I have decided to relate it to marionettes we have read in class. We have read this text called Marionettes, and the text is about a friend pair, Brayling and Smith, who are been friends for a very long time. And Braylings have not been out for a drink with Smith for, I think it was 10 years. And suddenly they meet and go out for a drink. And they talk about their love life and how they sometimes hate their partner because they're too clingy, or they're just too much in love, if you can say that. But then Brayling talks about this company who sells robot or marionettes, who looks exactly like as the person who wants to buy it. And then Smith, he starts to consider it, and Brayling shows that he has one at home who is taking care of his wife right now, and that's why he can go out and have a drink with Smith. And in the end of that story, the robot, or Brayling 2, actually gets very dangerous towards Brayling, because he talks about putting the robot back to a box, a cellar box, and the robot turns out to be very evil and wants Brayling, the original Brayling, to be inside the box, because the robot has started catching feelings for Brayling's wife. So it traps Brayling inside the box, and then it takes to Rio with his wife. And you also see that in the Veldt, where Peter and Wendy turns against their parents and locking them inside the nursery room. So the kids are too, too much addicted to the technology that they turn against the parents and traps them inside the Veldt, because they don't want to be adults and have responsibility that follows with being an adult. That's all I got.